Hello, my name is Sebastian Rendon, and today I will be interviewing the lead actor and director of the short film The Janitor, Emmanuel Rendon.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
In this interview, we'll be discussing the creative decisions behind the film, including its use of genre conventions, audience engagement, representation, and technical development. How does your product use or challenge conventions of its genre?
Okay, next question. So my film, The Janitor, mainly follows conventions of like the psychological thriller genre, which typically includes like suspense, mystery, minimal dialogue, and a strong focus on atmosphere. From the beginning, I wanted to create a sense of unease, and so I used a school setting, which is usually very like familiar and safe, but I presented it as like empty and quiet, as shown here. By doing this, I followed a common thriller convention of taking like an ordinary environment and making it feel like unsettling. The emptiness makes the audience feel as if like something's off, even if nothing obvious is like happening behind the scenes. And I also use like minimal dialogue, which is common in psychological thrillers. And instead of relying on speech, I focus on visual storytelling, so the audience has to pay attention to actions, expressions, and details in the scenes. A lot more subtle things that you may not notice upon like first view. For example, this interaction here. Um, and in terms of like cinematography, I used a bunch of like POV shots. Let me bring a few examples. Like here, um, here is another example. This is another example. These POV shots and these over-the-shoulder shots build suspense. Like by using these shots, it's as if it gives the audience time to sort of like imagine themselves through like the lens of the janitor and imagine like how they would react in this position, um, which may make them actually feel like a little bit of discomfortness, um, and feel that something is kind of sort of off. And I also made like a creative choice with sound by using Claire de Lune, like a famous classical piece. Instead of typical intense thriller music, I chose something softer and more emotional. The music naturally crescendos and decrescendos, which ended up aligning with moments of like higher tension and calmer moments quite perfectly. It's as if like the stars aligned. Like obviously I didn't make that score myself, and so it was just such a blessing that it ended up perfectly like that. And this helps guide the audience's emotions in a more subtle and controlled way.
Wow, that's really interesting, especially how you use the normal school setting to create tension. I feel like that as an audience member, that would make everything feel more real and kind of uncomfortable at the same time. So how does your product engage with audiences?
Nice. So my film engages the audience by making them focus on like the atmosphere and interpret what's happening instead of being directly told everything. Actually, in the same scene, that's like another example here. As I'm writing here, it's not implicit what I'm actually writing. I'm writing down my principal's license plate, but if you're not focusing, it may be easy to miss that. And so I wanted to make sure that the plot wasn't being told to you, but rather shown through visually. One way I did this was through like pacing and editing. I used like slower cuts and longer shots so the audience has time to really take in each moment, which helps build suspense because they're waiting for something to happen, which keeps them focused and on edge. Like an example is like right here. Um, this random cut, this random cut makes the audience consider like, why are we here in this random dude's house, which is the principal's house, but why are we transported here? And it becomes obvious that I'm actually at his house. The doorbell ring right here. Um, and sound also plays like a pretty big role in engagement. Like the use of Claire de Lune helps guide the audience emotionally. As the music builds, it makes moments feel more intense, and when it softens, it gives like a sense of like calm before tension builds again, which creates a kind of emotional rhythm that keeps the audience connected to what's happening on screen, which is also considered non-diegetic sound since the music isn't coming from within the scene itself, but is added for the audience, which allows me to control how the audience actually feels without needing any dialogue at all. Well, I include dialogue, but you know what I mean. And additionally, I use framing and composition to direct attention. For example, here, by placing the character alone in the frame, it makes the audience focus entirely on him and creates a feeling of isolation, which helps them feel engaged but also uncomfortable.
Yeah, I feel like that would make the audience kind of tense the whole time, especially with the slower pacing. It's like you're waiting for something to happen. So how does your product represent social groups or issues?
So, my film focuses on the representation of a janitor, which, I mean, let's be real. they're often seen as like background characters or like people that we don't often pay attention to, even though they're actually very important. And by making him the main focus, I sort of flip that narrative and I challenge the idea and bring attention to someone who's like often overlooked, shamefully overlooked. Yeah. The audience is forced to focus on him and think more deeply about his role. And the character is also represented in a more like complex way. Like depending on interpretation, he could be seen as like maybe mysterious, misunderstood, or even like outright threatening and just not a good guy. This avoids presenting him as like a simple stereotype and instead makes him like a bit more layered, like like onions. I also used visual techniques to reinforce this. Like for example, after him, I framed him alone in shots, as shown here, which emphasizes isolation. And this could reflect how people in similar roles might feel separated or unnoticed in like everyday life.
Oh yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense because most people wouldn't really think twice about a janitor, but your film kind of forces the audience to. So how does your production skills develop through the project?
Okay, so through the production of like the janitor, I developed my skills in camera work. I had to buy this $56, little doohickey, but actually very good purchase as it came with like the microphone and the light and the stand and everything itself. Um, and also too, like beforehand, I only knew how to like hit record and to not record vertically. And afterwards, I became more confident using like different angles, like candid shots, and thinking about how framing can affect meaning. Like for example, like isolating a character in the frame could create tension and make the audience feel uneasy. And in editing, I focus a lot on like pacing, making sure that the timing of each cut matched the tone of the film. Um, I learned that like a slower pacing could be more effective for building suspense. Like for example, here during this whole section, it really builds suspense because it makes you just like sit here and wait for something to happen. But also too, as I'm looking for him, this is something that's a bit more nerve wracking, and so I use a lot of like quick and shortcuts, as seen here. Um, and this really just helps build like the whole psychological thriller and how I'm actually approaching this. And it also improved a lot in like sound design. By using Claire de Lune, it helped me understand just how important music is in shaping emotion. I think this is something that you can only truly learn after once doing it yourself. I never really cared that much about music in movies, but like it creates much more of an impact than you would actually realize. And by aligning the music with key moments, I was able to make scenes feel a lot more like impactful without relying on dialogue. And overall, this project like really helped me understand how all the technical elements, like camera work, editing, and sound, really work together to create like a cohesive and like meaningful film.
Thank you for sharing your insights. It was really interesting to hear how your film uses both technical elements and creative decisions to create meaning and engage the audience.
Thank you so much. Absolutely, it's a pleasure.
It was a pleasure.